interesting. So that are the
Sorry.
two types of lens, because you had mentioned a number of different things that you're doing.
Yeah, so the certified general license is kind of the highest level that you can have. You can appraise anything of any value anywhere.
Okay.
Whereas most of the appraisals that you guys see are probably gonna be certified residential or just regular residential, maybe some trade. But those can only do residential real estate, depending on your residential license. You could do only up to $1 million, or you could do any size. For the certified residential, you can do any size.
Okay.
So, right.
And then there were different levels.
It's just like when you talk to anybody, right? You talk to people around the office here and people are figuring out different ways to do this business and different,
Yeah.
not as simple as we thought initially.
How's that changing now with the way the NAR lawsuit deal? I mean, for you guys, is it like, oh my God, what's gonna happen? How's your business? And,
Yeah, I mean, so nothing's happening till July, so I
Yep.
think we're all kind of like going about it as usual.
right,
until
business as usual, but that's gonna come quick, right? And so
Yeah.
how are you gonna then deal with buyers and,
Well, as Gary Keller says, hopefully we've all been doing it right already and like getting our representation agreement in order, before showing that first house, right? Like that's what we all should have been doing.
Sure.
So that this didn't actually become an issue. So, just making sure that that stuff's buttoned up. And then just seeing kind of what maybe does happen as far as different concessions and that type of thing goes within the MLS. That they're still figuring out, like how will that verbiage and that type of thing written about.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to just put it in a purchase agreement then, which is gonna be a big change, right?
That will be a big
So,
change, yep.
and you're gonna have some sellers that don't wanna then pay for a buyer's agent, things like that, and so
Yeah.
that's gonna be huge. The way the media is portraying it, oh, you're gonna save these buyers a whole bunch of money or sellers a whole bunch of money. It's not really gonna happen. I mean, the people still are gonna get paid. It's just now you're putting it into the purchase agreement itself.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's what I kind of figured too. The media's messed it up.
Yeah.
How they portrayed it, of course.
Yeah.
And
And I think the Inman that I read the other day was about like how the nervousness of having more buyers unrepresented now. Might end up being like the outcome of this instead of what they were hoping to have happen. So we'll see.
I'm hopeful that'll just be the ability to talk about value come to the forefront a little bit more, make it easier, so just because for the longest time, it's easier to say, oh, don't worry, the seller pays you. So you're not paying me as a buyer's agent, right? Like now you can actually talk about what you do and how much effort goes into you viewing homes. It's not just opening a door, right? Like, and I think that hopefully then all this just brings it to the forefront, right? I don't know. So.
Sounds like for you, there's a value that you can present the value. I think there's other people that they don't have value to present.
Exactly. Well,
They
that's
only do a lot for them.
right. Well, that's going to be the difference, right?
Which would be good for them.
Yeah. Well, I think everybody's going to have to articulate their value more. So, because that's on the lending side, right? It's key that we do that, but sometimes you don't, right? Because the conversation doesn't go that way. Minnesota, nice of us, we don't talk about it, but when somebody has to pay for you, then you go, okay, I want to know what I'm paying for, right? I think that it'll be normal for it to come up that way. So I don't know. That's what I hope anyway. Who knows what'll happen out of it.
The tough part, you're gonna have buyers that are unrepresented, and then the seller's agent's gonna have to fill out the paperwork and do all of that. But there's more liability too. When you have, there's gonna be some more disclosures, I'm sure, and some more things like, hey, if something goes wrong with this, get a home inspection, that type of thing, all that paperwork. Because I've seen it before where buyers come in and, we don't need a home inspection now. Right? And I would say you should always get a home inspection. I've seen some before, so a home being pulled off the foundation because of the way the deck was installed on the back and sloping hill and just crazy things.
I've always heard the other side, right? The inspection is like, wow, they can't go into the walls. They can't do, what are you paying for?
Yeah.
Interesting to hear from your perspective. Yeah. As appraising it.
More, 99% of the time it should be fine, but there is,
The horror stories, right?
Yep.
You as an appraiser, then let's say you go to a property, you notice maybe a deck that looks to be pulling away. Do you ever tap into the inspection report then?
We don't get to see that.
You
We don't, yeah,
Okay,
because
so you're-
the buyer is the one who orders it, and it's just
Okay.
it's for the buyer's knowledge or buyer's, negotiations, things like this. We don't get to see it. The only time we get to see it are like truth in housing or point of sale inspection
Yeah.
type things from the city. That says, hey, this is, come across something that's clearly electrical code violation. Then I'll pull it up and make sure it was called out in that truth in housing before I put it on board.
And you just access those to them.
They're just online by the city. So City of Minneapolis has those online, City of St. Paul.
Okay.
Robbinsdale had them. They just decided to go away with it now. But a bunch of the cities have point of it. So St. Louis Park have same point of sale inspection that you can access through the permitting, the online permitting section online.
My name's Bob. I watched it late, I don't know.
No, go ahead. We're kind of free forming it.
Okay. So from your perspective, you get the call to go look at a home. What information do you have about the transaction that got you? What information do you have?
The only thing we get is, if it's a purchase, it will get a copy of the purchase agreement, who the buyer is, who the contact info is, address, PID, things like that. So basic information, and then along with the purchase agreement. If it's a refinance, it'll be just the homeowner's name and phone number with, again, address, PID. Basic, it's just a standard form. Here's what the house is, go take a look at it.
And then MLS, so you have access to that?
We have, yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So I guess that's a good place to start though. Kind of what is your process when you get an order for say a purchase? What does that look like?
The first thing we'll do is, log it, get it, find out first when is the due date, try to get it scheduled as soon as possible because a lot of the AMCs say, hey, we need to have this borrower contact within 24 hours. That way the agent knows you're on top of it, the real estate agent, and the process is moving along and things like that. Sometimes we'll get it, and the mortgage people are far enough ahead, like they're on the ball, and the agent will be like, well, we haven't even had our inspection yet. We don't want you to come out until we do the inspection, right? Because someday if something falls through, or maybe they're worried about appraising FHA or whatever it happens to be. So, whenever we get it, we'll try to schedule it within 24 hours or contact them anyway to get it scheduled. Take a look at the purchase agreement and then start pulling comps, just to see what's in the area. So we can try to get a short list of, with everything now, ever since 2007, we've had to go out and drive and take photos of all of the comps too. So we make sure we get enough sales that it's going to bracket our subject. And so we'll follow Fannie Mae guidelines and say, hey, we got to bracket our above grade square footage or GLA by plus or minus 15%. We have to be, we look at our neighborhood and say, we don't want to cross highway boundaries, river boundaries, things like that, all the standards.
How far back do you go?
We start with 6 months. They ideally want it within 6 months, but if there's a limited number of comps, we'll go back a full year.
Okay.
If it's rural, I did one, I did one yesterday in Richfield that it was a newer construction home. And there were between like 2010 and 2020, just before COVID hit, there were maybe 8 new homes a year being built by this one builder, right?
Yeah.
Brand new homes. And a lot of them were, they got the land dirt cheap, anywhere from $35,000 to $60,000 for a regular city lot. So he was able to build them at decent prices versus if you went a mile north on the other side of 62 into South Minneapolis, those lots were selling for like $200,000.
Okay.
Right. So you can get a lot more home in Richfield by going like 1 mile south versus in Minneapolis. Well, anyway, trying to find these resales when there's only say 80 new homes in Richfield from 2010 till now, the resales are very limited. There was 0 in the last 12 months and only 2 in the previous 12 to 24 month period. So then you have to go into Minneapolis and then you have to figure out what your location adjustment is gonna be. Because those homes are selling for 150,000 more because they cost 150,000 more to build to start with, right? So, in that case, your standards are go back 6 months, within a half mile in the city, within a mile in the suburbs, not crossing highway boundaries, things like that. But if there's no comps available, you have to expand your search and then be able to explain why you're expanding.
And so you mentioned just the different ways that you're determining value on that. So what weight is given to comps versus cost approach or?
So, yeah, if it's a newer home, anything within 5 years, we have to do the cost approach.
Okay.
But really, you're weighting the sales comparison approach because buyers out there aren't saying, hey, I could just build this over here because the land, especially in the urban areas there's just very few parcels available. So, you're really looking at, hey, what is this house versus this house? And we have to bracket our attributes about the house. So we need to find one that's smaller, one similar size, and one larger, make the adjustments. Same number of bedrooms, bathrooms, can be less or more, but they have to be bracketed. So if your subject has 3 bedrooms above grade and all of the comps have 4 bedrooms, well, the underwriter, his first question is going to be, can you find me a comp with 3 bedrooms above grade to match the subject? And if you can't, then you have to explain why. Well, maybe the homeowner took out a dividing wall to make a large master bedroom, right? And you could add that wall back in at a nominal, $2,000, something like this, and then it would be a 4-bedroom. But for some buyers, maybe empty nesters who don't have kids and don't need the 4 bedrooms, this 3-bedroom with a super large master suite is a better way to go. So it doesn't appeal to all buyers, but if that's what happened, you have to dig into it a little bit more and then just explain.
Speaking of that, so when you get calls, do you appreciate like a listing agent that might reach out to you and just talk to you? And if so, what info would be
So
value?
yeah, some agents like to provide comp. Anytime an agent, one of the first things, the most valuable thing for us is, hey, how many showings did you have? How many offers? What was the feedback that you're getting on the house? And, if you can print off that showing time, like a list of, hey, here, we had 25 showings this weekend. That's a good thing because that shows, hey, this house, there's this many people willing to come out and take a look at my listing. That shows what the demand is in this market, right? So that information is really key. And then if, any feedback that you got from other agents, if you had multiple offers, all of that, some agents, we don't even hear from them and I have to call them and they won't even call me back. So, if you want to sell your listing, try to sell it to the appraiser, right? You're trying to say, hey, this is a great listing. We have a ton of showings on this and 3 offers and all over asking, whatever happens to be. Or the seller priced this low so that it would be a quick sale, things like that.
I don't think I've heard that, like, call the appraiser. I think people hear like.
People are afraid to call.
Well,
Or like, you shouldn't do that, you don't want to.
Because you're scary for a second.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever, but.
Persuading them or
We want to be looked at as trying to.
try to influence the value.
Manipulate
Yeah.
or influence,
Yeah, so
yeah,
we're kind of-
so.
No, but if it's something that supports your value without saying, well, geez, I got some gold doorknobs and I got, this should easily be worth this. If you just say, hey, here's what happened. We had this many showings, this many offers, all over asking. We chose this offer because it was a cash buyer or, whatever happens to be that. You're not influencing value at all there. You're just explaining, hey, this is what this market is for this house. Because, if an appraiser hasn't been in the Maple Grove market in the last 6 months, they might not know, like it's really hot.
Right.
We look at everything, home inventory, if there's a 1.2 month supply of homes on the market, we know that there's good demand, there's gonna be good demand, and most of the offers are gonna be over asking then. But the things that if you send us comps, the biggest thing is send us relevant comps rather than a lot of and I see this even with these large Minnetonka homes, right? They send us these comps that are a 1-story comp versus a 2-story comp. We can't compare those 2 home styles, 1 stories can be 3-level splits, 4-level splits, split entries, 1-story homes, things like this. 2-story homes can be like modified 2 stories, full 2 stories, 1.5 even, things like that. But we can't compare the different home styles or Fannie Mae. Just take it back up. Because if you have a 3,000 square foot Rambler unfinished basement, and you have a 3,000 square foot, 2-story home, which is gonna cost more to build? That'd be the Rambler, right? You got more foundation, you got more roof, you got more, all of that. Plus the ability to finish your 3,000 square foot Rambler into a 5,000 or 6,000 square foot home versus your 3,000 square foot 2-story, which the max you're gonna have is 1,500 maybe on the lower, it's just a different, the cost is the biggest thing. Cost to build those two are two different. So, so when you're sending us comps, send us ones that are relevant. Try to bracket your above grade area by plus or minus 15%. I know a lot of agents send me things like, hey, this home has a total finished area of 3,000 and this one has a total of 4,000. Buyers look at that sometimes, right? Sellers look at that sometimes, but if you look on the appraisal form, those two items are split out. You got your above grade area and then your below grade area. And that's how we have to do the appraisal. That's the Fannie Mae guideline. So if you're sending comps to an appraiser, bracket your above grade square footage. Don't cross highway boundaries unless you have to. If there's no comps on your side of the highway and you have to do it, then you can cross highway boundaries, but you have to explain. I mean, it takes paragraphs to explain. So. But sending relevant comps are, I had one in Edina last week or 2 weeks ago. 1980s house, hasn't really been updated. Edina is a good neighborhood, desirable, right? You got good schools and things like that. The agent sent me homes that were different styles. They said, oh, what about this one down the street, 3 doors down? This is a great sale. It just sold for 1.7, but it was a home that was 2 years old compared to a 1980s home. Would a buyer really think that those two are the same house? They're like, well, it supports the value. Of course it does, because it's a new house.
It's hard on our end, kind of price a house sometimes. You gotta like look at stuff, especially when you don't have many comps. Because last year was so bad, nothing sold. Nobody was doing any transactions because their whole thing because of interest rate. So then I tried pricing out this home and I'm looking at comps and there's just nothing there. So you kind of in your head, you do, even though there wasn't a lot of sales in your head, you still say housing probably went up 2 to 3%. Because it just did, right? Because there's, on other years, maybe it was up 7, other years, different things. Like try to do that. Do you take that into consideration at all? Like,
we look at,
so like let's say last, as an example, last April, something sold before the interest rates and shut everybody down. Something sold at this price. And then now in January, I've got a house that I sold. You take that price and say, well, probably, because now the market's going to kick off. It's probably going to go up a little bit then. Is there any kind of?
we do on every appraisal, we have a market trends that shows, hey, here's what your median price per square foot was in the Twin Cities market. Here's what the median price per square foot was in Minnetonka. And then we look at when the last sale date was for these other sales. And if you're looking at a price per square foot of 148 and today it's 149, well, maybe the market's stable. Or if it's 170 now, hey, look, we can show that the market is appreciating and we can use an older sale then. But there's a couple agents that call me all the time and say, hey, will you come and do comps for me? And no, I'll just go up there and I'll measure the house and say, hey, here's the 3 comps I would use. And they can go back to they use it as part of their listing agreement to their sellers to say, hey, here's what this appraiser said that we think it's worth. Because in these rural areas, especially, when you get just west of here, there's just no sales, right? When you got a acreage, 5 to 10 acres, something like this, and you got a big Rambler and there's just absolutely no sales in the last year, then you have to get creative and go further out. You might have to go up to 5 miles away. You have to go, and they don't know what the appraisal process is. So, so then he calls me and says, hey, can you go and do this? I just charge a smaller fee, not a full appraisal. But that's the things you have to think outside the box. Like if you're a buyer, what other areas are you looking at? If it's not Independence, maybe you're going to go to Waconia or some, you might have to go further away to find your comps.
I've been doing business out like that, all the way out to Wells, Minnesota, or Albany, Minnesota. I'm looking at it.
And it's hard for appraisers because we have to come up with those comps. We have to come up with 3 good comps for this, and that's a challenge in the last year because there's just so few sales.
Right. That's what I'm. Okay.
What do you notice with, tax values? They seem to be creeping up, their assessed values seem to be going up. There's one agent I just talked to said, Minnetonka, Minnetrista, Mound, that type of thing. She's even seeing it exceeding the sales price of
Yeah.
homes. How is that impacting?
So the assessor ideally, they want your tax value to be within 95 to 100% of what the market value is. They don't want it over, because then they're gonna get flooded with all these tax appeals, right? They don't wanna have to do all that work.
Yeah,
So they wanna get it close, but not quite up there.
Yeah.
But their system, they use a mass appraisal type system, which is different than we do. We use paired sales. We say, hey, here's my 3 sales, inferior, similar, superior. They use a mass appraisal type system, and they say, well, in this neighborhood, homes went up, 11% last year. So now everybody's values go up 11%. I mean, that's just how they only can go into homes like they're supposed to go into homes once every 5 years. But nowadays, nobody lets homes anyway. So, but it's a mass appraisal type system. And remember that their valuation date is January 2nd of the previous year. So values at that time might have been still going up, but they have some time to correct it for the next year then, before they have to submit their value.
But you don't take that into consideration for your value.
What the tax value is?
Yeah,
No,
not at all.
no.
I didn't think so, but
We look at it. We look at what they have for land values. We look at, we look at what the allocation, we use an allocation method. If we have to use a cost approach and there's no land sales in the area, we say, okay, the assessor has land value at 18% of the total market value. Let's see what the other ones are in the area here, and then come up with a value for the land for our subject if we have to do cost.
that's similar how you would do it if it's like a tear down or, good use renovation, that type of thing, like the
Yep.
city.
Yep.
Okay.
I have a question. I'm Jack. I work with Eric, and so I'm having a lot of clients looking at multifamilies right now. So for the rental income approach, is that similar to like neighborhood specific, or is it a little bit more uniform?
It's neighborhood specific. It depends on if you're in an area that's a suburban area that it may be the only rental in the neighborhood, that's tough. You can't just go based on what your contract rent is. For doing a operating income statement and rent schedule, we have to find rent comps in the neighborhood. So we get a lot of them in, near U of M and things like this. So student housing is a whole nother ball of wax because you're renting it based on a per room typically, right?
Right.
You're paying $500 to $650 a month. Versus if you're renting a duplex, you're renting by the unit.
Yeah.
So if you go to other parts of St. Paul or Minneapolis, it's by the unit and you're looking at the size, number of bedrooms, what's the rent per square foot, per bedroom, per bathroom, things like that. Is there a garage and amenities like
Right.
that?
And then are there things that our clients can do to increase the rental value?
We look at what the rent is in that market. So we have to find those 3 rent comps to find out what's similar. Now, your market appeal might be new appliances. Maybe the unit has a washer and dryer, which a lot of the units don't have. That's a big bonus for a single mom with kids or something like this, right? They can stay right there and do their laundry, storage, things like that for kids' toys, bikes, things like that.
Yeah.
So, but it's more market appeal, is your fresh paint, what is the condition of your property?
Yeah.
So, and you can there's so much rental data, go to rent.com, go to apartments.com. There's so much rental data that you can find what the rents are for that particular neighborhood.
Cool. Never thought of that.
Being that, how would you advise, like on a selling when you're listing? And how would you advise the seller to prepare for an appraisal, or is there anything in particular that?
If there's renters,
No, just
Or-
with in general.
Oh, in general.
Just selling a property.
for an appraisal, I would say it's more like you prepare your house for the listing, you get it cleaned and decluttered and all that standard stuff. For an appraisal, we go into homes and there's boxes floor to ceiling and barely a path you can walk through, and we look past all the personal property. We go into the house and picture it as though it's completely empty. That's how. So that stuff doesn't affect us at all.
I've heard opposite, actually. I've heard from other appraisers that they actually say like, clean your house as if
You're
you're.
gonna show it.
I mean, it shows good for the
Because-
photos.
And it just, also they're like, 'cause, you know, like, let's say, one example that somebody gave was, it was like this beautiful house, but then they got an offer on it and, you know, like, it's dirty, there's dishes, there's, you know, it's hard to see past the corners and different things then if you're not like upkeeping the house.
Yeah.
To say like, oh, what condition do you give the
Yeah.
overall house if, you know, it's a mess, or you can't really see beyond this because it has so much stuff in it, or.
No, yeah, I mean, so I used to flip houses. I can see beyond any garbage that's in a house, right? So maybe not all appraisers can, but you know, when we go in, we look at it as, oh, it's empty. If it's, now, you're trying, as an appraiser too, we're trying to sell our appraisal to the underwriter, just to say, hey, look, this, you know, and based on the photos that we present to, we try to get the best photos of the house and try to, at least we should anyway. Because we're trying to show the underwriter what the overall condition is, the updating. Is it well kept? Is it, you know, are the walls all, they have holes in them, and doors have holes in them that are scratched up or whatever it happens to be? Those types of things help show what the overall condition was and helps the underwriter know that the house is well taken care of and it's worth this price. So the photos, you know, most of the time people have it cleaned up so that it looks good in the photos too. And even though the only one that's gonna see that is the underwriter, but I think it's a good thing.
I always tell, the next big hurdle is the appraisal and.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Like
as long
it's
as
showing, right?
as long as we put stuff in there and it's organized.
Yep.
it's Better. Not everybody has your experience with flips and all that, right? There could be some guy that, I mean, it can always get tainted, like even if they may have fish the next day. I mean,
Yeah.
houses that don't pass the smell test, you get kind of, I mean, anybody walks in.
I agree.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
Appraisers are human too, I guess.
Yeah. I would think, approach it as best you can.
That's all the questions. Anybody else got anything they want to ask or thoughts or anything?
You have a card?
Yeah, I do. I'll grab one for you here. The other thing I was gonna say is when you guys, do you measure your own houses or do you have a service that does it or?
If I don't do it, I'll have a service do it.
Okay.
I'll just, it's nice on it, I'll ask.
Yeah.
Some houses.
Do you have like, so do you guys, have you heard of ANSI B765?
What's that?
ANSI B765? If you Google that, it's the 2021 version that we're using. That will tell you how appraisers measure houses across the nation. So they changed this back in, well, 2021.
Oh, like Nancy, like American National. Oh,
Yep.
Yeah.
And so for appraisers now, they changed the way we measure houses where we have to go to the nearest 1/10 of a foot from the exterior dimensions of the building, right?
Yeah.
So that includes the siding. So now all of our appraisals, whereas before they used to match our tax record. So say it was a 24-foot wide front of your house, now it's 24.2. So all of our values for GLA are different than what the assessors are now. But the biggest thing that we find is the problem is measuring like a 1.5 story, like Cape Cod, right? You have the slanted walls. You can only include living area that's 5 feet and above. So if your wall is slanting, just look and say, hey, here's my new floor layout. It's going to be where the slanted walls meet 5 feet. And at least 50% of the room has to be a minimum of 7 feet high. So if your upper level is only 6 feet, 10 inches high, none of that can be included in above grade square footage. It can be included in the appraisal report on a separate line because it does have value. Maybe the kids use it as a playroom, or it's just a bonus room that you go and watch TV in or something like this, right?
Or it still works for me because I'm shorter.
Yeah, for the shorter
Yep.
people.
But the minimum has to be at least 50% of your area. And this goes for basements too. If your basement ceiling height is below 7 feet, we can't include it on the basement line. We have to say, hey, look, it's functional obsolescence, but it's still usable space and the market does show that it adds value. So we're going to give it some value. It might be a diminished value or a reduced value, but there is some value to it still.
Why did they, oh, sorry, go
I was
ahead.
gonna say, like, I'm thinking of basements, right? People always drywall down, in certain parts to cover like the ductwork or whatever.
Yep.
So you have to say, okay, from there over, like the rest of it is,
As long as it's above 5 feet, so if you have ductwork, whatever.
Yeah.
You can include that entire basement area as long as more than 50% of it is above 7 feet, right? Anything that's more than 50% is above
More than
7 feet. So that ductwork, that area under the ductwork still counts as a livable area.
okay, interesting.
Yeah.
What was the reasoning behind like changing it so that it's different from the other market value assessment of like size and stuff? Like why
They
did
wanted,
change that?
they wanted to standardize it across the country now. It's the first time they've done it where it was countrywide. Now, the problem that you have is in the hills of California, Hollywood Hills or something, where you have these steep hills and a portion of the house, right? If you have any portion of your lower level, say you have a Rambler style home where it's a walkout basement, that's the front, say, and it's on the back of the hill, it's coming towards the front of the house. And your main floor is really just, you walk into your basement and then you go up to your main floor where your kitchen and bath or living room and things like that are. In the hills, those hills are steeper, and maybe part of that above grade, that upper level is still below grade. Even if it's only 2 feet, that entire level is below grade. So what do you have then? You have a house with 0 square feet above grade. So they run into issues out there where if you have an appraisal that says 0 square feet, it gets kicked out, but then you have to read into it and say, well, this actually, although it's technically below grade based on ANSI Z 765, this is how this market considers our livable area. We don't have that around here, but they just want to get like a standard across the country. So if you have say if you have a 4-level split, if any part of one of those levels is below grade, that entire level, even if it's just the front corner part where the garage is right behind it, that's considered below grade.
What's the logic on that, where the below grade versus above grade? Because I mean, a lot of.
Because remember, your above grade square footage is how you bracket your GLA, your above grade area.
Okay.
Is how
So
you
just
pull your
consistency.
comps and say, and above grade area is worth more than below grade area.
Okay, even the commissioners, that's the argument you get a lot. Oh, there's a basement, there's a bedroom, there's a bathroom, there's a living room, family room,
Right.
right? But people are.
But how much does it cost to build out a basement, your basement square footage? It might cost you 35 to 50 grand to build out your basement, but well, now it's a little bit more, but whereas your above grade, it might be $200 a foot. Above grade, it might be $50 a square foot below grade to build it out. Because your walls, your foundation, everything is already there.
That makes sense.
It costs more to build below grade.
No, above grade,
Like
Yeah.
adding on to your house, right? Adding square footage that way. So it's a cost approach that takes over.
that? ANSI.
ANSI, ANSI,
ANSI.
yep, Z 765. And it's -2021. If you Google that, it gives you, there's a few flyers and Fannie Mae has put out that says, here's why we did this. Here's what, you should look for. Here's some precautions. I also have a flyer that I sent out that, or to agents, that they say, hey, how would you measure this house, a 1.5 story, that kind of says, hey, here's where the walls are. Here's your knee wall. Here's your angles. And I can send that to you guys too, or I can send it to Eric and he can forward it to you guys so you can
I'll remind
just,
you.
it helps agents understand how to measure, especially when they're on the spot. They're like, I forgot, does this count or not,
Sure.
So. Because the worst thing to do is when an appraiser goes out there and they pull comps on a 1,400 square foot, 1.5 story, and they find out, well, it's really only 900 square feet. All their comps then are out the window and they got to start over and make another trip out to take those comp photos. So.
So how do you handle updated stuff versus the original, that type of thing when it comes to value? I know it's not 1 for 1, right? But it's not a.
There is, we have if you ever read the appraisal report, there's quality and condition adjustments or categories. C3 might have an updated kitchen and bathrooms and, it's a condition 3. Whereas a C4 is just your standard house that maybe, 1990s or whatever, hasn't been updated, doesn't really need to be updated, it's still functional. But the updated one that's where we make our condition adjustments or for any updates would be in the condition or quality lines.
Is that the same with refinances too? Like,
Yeah.
how do you do that with
Yep.
comparables?
Same thing. For us, refinance and purchase really it doesn't
I
matter.
just mean when you get the comparables, you're just assuming that for the area, it's expected it should be at a C3. Some updates should have been happening since.
Yeah, it depends on the neighborhood. Yep. So if all the comps in the neighborhood are all updated, you know, because we can look at all the interior photos too on the MLS. We have the same full access as any agent does. And then we can use that as our comparison. So that's ideally how we narrow down our comps. If we have a 1950s Rambler in St. Louis Park that hasn't been updated at all,
Mhm.
and it's got the flat front cabinets versus all of, you know, a lot of St. Louis Park has new kitchens and new bathrooms. That's where we would make our adjustments. Or we would try to find other comps with a kitchen that hasn't been updated, because that's really a different price point.
Sure, that makes sense.
I have a question. On the note of like refinance and then just talking with the appraiser.
Yep.
Like, do you find it beneficial if the homeowner contacts you beforehand and is like, these are all the updates we've made? To the
If they have a list and say they've spent, you know, what, if they have, especially if they can itemize, and this goes for sales too. If you have a list that says, hey, we put in new mechanicals, it cost us, you know, $14,000. We put in a new deck, a maintenance-free deck, it was 25 grand. Any of those things, especially with associated costs, definitely helps out because we can then add that to the report and use that as, hey, here's our justification to the underwriter, right? But if you just say, hey, we got a new deck and maybe a new central air and blah, 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 with no dollar amounts put to it, you know, if the sellers put in a bunch of money in the house, that should definitely itemize it for the appraiser. And even if you just send it in an email, you know. Yeah.
With that information, how do you?
Well, your seller would know that, right? You would think. If you don't know the dollar amounts, then just send a list of what they did.
Right,
But-
but how do you appraise that as far as how, like an upgrade, you have certain like for kitchen upgrades, say X amount of dollars? Or how do you?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you're not gonna get a dollar for dollar return on investment, but you're gonna try to find comps that also have similar updated kitchens. Now, I've seen some kitchens where they went over the top and have, you know, Carrera marble countertop and inset doors, you know, cabinets with inset doors, those are very expensive I mean, that can double the price of your cabinet. So you could put in an IKEA kitchen for $7,000, or you can put in a nice custom kitchen in the same house and it might cost you $50,000. So, you know, we look at the quality and things like that. Hopefully there's other comps in the neighborhood that have that, because you don't want to be the nicest house on the block, right? And hopefully there's other comps in the neighborhood that have those similar upgrades, and if not, then we just have to adjust for them based on normally we do it based on a percentage of the purchase price. So, and then we use, you know, try to use logic. It might be 5%, and then we say, okay, on this $250,000 house, that's 5%, you know, does that seem reasonable for a buyer to pay X dollars for that upgraded kitchen or bathroom? Yeah, and again, any feedback that you get from your showings definitely helps out. So if you say, hey, look, people love this, or, you know, of course, an agent is gonna wanna say, well, yeah, they didn't really like the highway sound wall that's in the front of the house, or, you know, they're not gonna say that, but if it was a detriment, I mean, the appraiser's gonna see that anyway. Or if there were upgrades that you don't, say the agent doesn't even contact the appraiser, if there were upgrades, we're gonna see those when we go through and be able to spot, hey, this is a brand new cabinets or new trim or new doors, new windows, things like that. We have kind of a checklist that we have to go through that looks for all those things.
John, I'm just thinking about my friend who just bought kind of an older grandma house in Minnetonka. It's a really nice neighborhood, but hasn't been updated in a long time.
Yeah.
So probably like kitchens and bathrooms, is that a good place to start for doing repairs?
For sure. Those
Yeah.
are the two main items
Okay.
that buyers look for is kitchen and bathroom.
Yeah. And then if there's like, just kind of like laundry room, like boiler room area, but like if you increase like the livable space and like turn that into a whatever, like a
Anything that there's
family
more,
room.
say you have an unfinished basement or a
Yeah.
half finished basement, anytime you're increasing the square footage or livable area of the home,
Mhm.
that's your next biggest bang for your buck.
Cool.
Yep.
That makes sense. Nice.
Depending on the area, garages are a big thing, like in South Minneapolis, you know, you have, especially, not necessarily the areas with higher crime, But you have areas where some of them have no garages or one garage. If you come across a 2 or a 3 car garage, buyers love that. They're like, oh, wow, 3-car garage. We never saw that in Minneapolis, and they want that, especially guys with wood shops or, work on cars or things like this.
What about accessory units, like above the garage and those type of things, or the
Yeah,
backyard, that type of thing?
Those are becoming more and more, especially in Minneapolis. They've been trying to get, ADUs for years, and they changed the zoning code, although now they just repealed that zoning
Oh,
code. I don't
awesome.
know if you're aware of
I
that.
wasn't,
So
this question.
we'll see, but they do allow, accessory units on almost any type of property, so.
So is that a value, from a value perspective? I suppose it's hard to find comparables.
It
There's
is,
not a lot of them.
it's, sometimes we'll have to go back 2 or 3 years to find sales with ADUs on them. They're becoming more popular now, though, I mean, especially the units that are above garages. If you go into the area off of, Kenwood, like Mount Curve and things like this, there's a bunch of those where they were maybe originally nannies quarters or whatever.
Mhm.
Then nobody used them for 50 years. Now all of a sudden they're like, hey, let's update this and make this nice again.
Yeah.
And some are being rented out, some are being, so.
What about truly like unique properties like that? What if you can't find anything, or those damn geo homes, or, you know what I mean, the dome homes?
Yeah.
There's like 3 in the state that always seem to pop up. No one can ever do them.
I had to
How do you
do-
handle those?
I had to do a dome home once. The berm homes are tough. I mean, a dome home, it was basically, you look back, sometimes you gotta go back 5 years. So I went 45 miles away to find a comp. You have to sometimes go into Wisconsin. I mean, there's so few of those. And before I accept the order on those really funky ones, I'll go and look it up and say, hey, or just sometimes just decline it. If there's absolutely no sales, I don't.
Well, that's what I seen, like people
Yeah.
turning churches into homes and,
Yeah.
all that unique stuff. And then
Yeah.
it's literally just, is there anything like it anywhere?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, those are definitely.
So those are the listings, like, no wonder you can get it, right? Nobody else wants it. Or if you're the 5th person that came into it.
Yeah,
And
that's
so,
right.
I have one more question.
Sure, yeah.
Is there anything that you can do with the short-term rental? Like if there's a lot of Airbnbs in the area or like anything with short-term rentals?
Is there anything you can do with it?
Yeah, like can you look at a short-term rental approach versus the long-term rental incomes?
So on any Fannie Mae form, you cannot. Fannie Mae
Yeah.
forms are for, especially the rent schedules and things like this are for standard year leases, or what we would call the market rent for
Right.
that. If you're looking at Airbnb rent or VRBO or things like this, that's more of a going concern, or a business valuation that you do, but it's done by a commercial appraiser.
Okay, okay,
It wouldn't be a residential loan.
that makes sense.
So if you try to sell it to your agent or to the loan officer that, hey, we're getting this income, and they try to push this through, that's a big problem for them.
Yeah,
So,
okay,
because an appraiser shouldn't be putting like monthly or nightly rents on a market rent form.
right,
And people have been getting called out on that lately, so.
yeah.
hourly is okay.
No, those are illegal.
No, whoops, struck that from the record. Awesome. Yeah, please do, yeah. We're good. This isn't live, is it? Awesome, let's do it again now. Anybody have any other questions? This has been super helpful.
Yeah, it's
We've
been
dove
really
into
great.
some stuff that didn't even realize it, so. I don't know, thank you so much for coming.
Sure, yeah.
Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Sean.
I'll leave my card in case you guys have any questions.
Yeah.
You can call anytime. People send me reports and be like, hey, does this look right? Or is there anything I can do to send in a rebuttal on this or whatever? And I have no problem looking up for you guys, so.
Awesome. Same thing with like those tax appeals that we
Yeah,
talked about with
yeah.
clients.
I had somebody call me, last week for a tax appeal in St. Paul, and I just said, you know what, the value's pretty much right on. Your neighborhood's gone up 20% in the last 4 years, so, it's just, it is what it is, and.
Good to know. No, that's a
Yeah.
good resource on that for sure. So, awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.